The room was washed in yellow light too hard from the tube overhead. I could see the shadow it drew on the committee's faces, sharpening their lines, making them look like they wanted to cut me down. The ceiling fan pushed the hot air in circles, carrying the faint stink of sweat and talcum powder familiar in the university's old seminar wing. My hands felt damp against the file I gripped, my project, my dream. The words on the first page swimming under the breath and noise. I stood before the panel, arms stiff at my sides, the file pinched in my right hand. The head of the committee, Professor Joshi, adjusted her glasses, eyes flickering across the room as if searching for something else to focus on. 3 others flanked her on plastic chairs, one busy swirling his pen, another drumming his fingers in a slow rhythm that matched my heart's frantic beats. Aditya, Professor Joshi began, all business, we've reviewed your proposal for final project submission. A documentary on Mumbai's waste workers, scavengers and pickers, is that correct? The word scavengers lingered in the air. I could almost hear home in her voice, dismissive and dry. Yes, ma'am, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. My aim is to. Her hand came up like a wall. Aditya, we appreciate student initiative. You are aware that most documentaries selected for our archives are on cultural heritage, classical art and architecture. Your subject lacks, what should I say, relevance, substance. Across the panel, a professor snickered. He was the one who always wore a maroon kurta. No one wants to see rag pickers on film, young man. This is Mumbai, can't you offer something more aspirational? You have talent but such a ridiculous dream. Why not focus on, say, the Gateway or theatre? The coolness in his tone scraped something raw in me. I tried to steady my breathing, arranging my anger somewhere just behind my ribs. I'd known they would doubt me, I just didn't think they'd say it so openly. My project seeks to, I began again, but Joshi interrupted. It's been rejected, Aditya. We've already filled this session's quota. Please submit something more appropriate. My mouth tasted of old metal, sharp and dirty. I wanted to shout that they were blind, that the story I carried was as real as sunlight in Dharavi. But rage in that moment would have only become another mark against me. I nodded, eyes on the stained floor. My shoes looked too big, clownish. Thank you, ma'am, I whispered. As I stepped out, the hush of the seminar wing was a slap. It was only once I hit the hallway that I realized my hands were shaking. The walls were plastered with faded posters featuring documentaries about peacocks, palaces, some temple ruins in pink-hued light. None of them looked like my Mumbai, the city I ran through every day with a tripod strapped to my back and dreams that didn't fit inside stone buildings. My phone buzzed, a message from home, Ma probably texting to say the tiffin had gone cold. For a second I wanted to call her to let my anger spill out, but I stuffed my phone into my bag and walked on. Home was 3 local train stops away, a 2-room flat in Vikhroli, perched above a row of shops selling electronics and gutka. The city's weight pressed its fingers into every crack there. When I entered, my father sat on the cot reading the day's news in Marathi, lines bracketing his mouth so tightly they rarely moved to express anything but worry. My little sister Vidya was hunched over her homework on the floor. She looked up hopefully, searching my face for some sign that good things could still happen. Her eyes widened when she saw my slumped shoulders. Baba didn't bother waiting. They rejected it, didn't they? He asked, not unkind but not kindly either. I nodded, dropping my bag quietly. Beta, why you keep chasing after this foolish idea? He continued, folding the paper with a sigh. Cameras, stories about garbage men, who in the world cares for that? Our neighbor's boy works in IT, decent job, good money, and he is the pride of his parents. Every year you dream up new nonsense. I wanted to snap back, to tell him that I'd met the waste pickers, that their stories were more urgent than dancing peacocks and palaces. But my father's expectations were slabs of granite by now too heavy to budge. Vidya slipped across the room and squeezed my hand. At least you tried, Baya, she said softly. I locked my jaw and tried not to cry. I wouldn't let myself cry in front of them. During the weeks that followed, I filmed anyway. I went out with my battered DSLR, only mine because it was second-hand and barbied after every shoot, and walked the lanes beneath Sion flyover, where Miraben and her team sorted plastic bottles through the damp sunrise. They let me follow with my camera, and when dogs barked or rains soaked us both, Miraben told me, let them say what they want. You know, people used to laugh at me too. Now my children are in college. Even in my anger, I found pockets of hope. Sometimes I imagined Professor Joshi walking these streets, face pinched against the odor, realizing the truth she'd missed. Those images gave me a stubborn kind of strength, but I was broke and the city was relentless. My father's jibes grew sharper. When I borrowed his old scooter for a late shoot, he grumbled, "If only your dreams could fill the petrol tank." Chai in the mornings began to taste different, the familiar bitterness layered with the memory of his words. Every evening I'd climb to the rooftop, camera in hand, watching the city fade into a million fragments of light. On the rare days I felt momentum, Vidya would poke her head up, a mug of tea perched in her hands. "One day they'll see," she said. "When your film comes on a big screen, you'll invite them all, even Baba." I smiled then, but bitterness coated the back of my tongue. In the end, the university wouldn't accept my film for graduation. I took it outside instead. I worked overtime at my uncle's electronics store, fixing remotes, swapping wires, stacking boxes. In between shifts, I edited on an ancient computer that barely ran Premiere Pro, the fan whirring like a dying insect. I sent emails everywhere. Film festivals never replied. Strangers still were the responses from friends and family, polite silence or worse, their sympathy. Once my aunt asked at a family wedding, right in front of cousins and uncles, "Arai, Addy, heard you point that camera at some catcrawlers. What next? You'll make movies about panwallahs too. Better get a real job." Her laughter was sharp as broken glass. I remember my cheeks burning, the urge to throw my water bottle across the shiny marble floor. But all I managed was a tight smile, retreating to the balcony until the crowd thinned. At home, my mother said I was wasting my best years on blurry dreams. Some days I wanted to believe them. There were long nights in that cramped room where I stared at the ceiling, film paused at some frame of a child scraping through plastic. What was the point? Nobody wanted these stories, but rage, I found, can be a kind of fuel. Instead of letting it scatter me, I worked harder. Film after film, blog after blog, micro-story posted to dwindling followers. I slept with my camera next to my head, as if hope could cling to sleep the way the city clings to those old billboards above tracks. 3 years after university, everything changed on a Wednesday. I was behind the counter at my uncle's shop, wrestling a stuck antenna wire when my phone buzzed. The notification said, "Mumbai International Documentary Showcase, picking up Mumbai selected as opening night film. Please reply to confirm attendance." I stared at the message, blinking, thinking I'd dreamt it, but it didn't fade. I read it 5 more times, the words burning into my brain. "Beta, don't stand like statue," my uncle barked. "Hand me the coil." But my hands refused to move. Instead, I laughed, a sharp hiccuping sound. My uncle frowned as if I'd shorted out in public. When I finally explained, he just shook his head in bafflement. Maybe only Vidya understood. When I rushed home that evening, flinging the news at her, her joy filled the whole flat. Baba was silent. He muttered, "Don't get your hopes too high," but there was something uneasy in his eyes. The first time I saw my film on the showcase schedule, it was on a website. My name next to director, the documentary's title in bold. I touched the screen, half believing. From that moment on, things accelerated. Someone at the festival wanted an interview. The festival director, a sleek woman with rimless glasses, called me inspiring. I was told to prepare a short speech for the opening night. I called Professor Joshi. She sounded distant, as if trying to recall my face. "Congratulations, Aditya. Sometimes the world proves us wrong," she said just that and hung up. The festival was held at a restored Art Deco cinema near Churchgate. Stepping into that foyer, walls lined with sepia film posters, carpet fresh beneath my feet, I felt as if I'd wandered onto a set out of place. People wore pressed shirts, elegant silk saris, and spoke in clipped English that skimmed across the air. I could see amongst them faces I remembered from university, some committee members, even the maroon curter. Joshi, sharp as ever, mingled with another group. When she spotted me, her head tilted as if reconsidering a puzzle. Backstage, I waited behind a thick velvet curtain. The opening night crowd was larger than I'd imagined, every seat humming with anticipation. My heart ticked rapidly like a projection reel about to snap. The film began. From the dark, I watched flickering images, Miraben's hands sorting plastic at dawn, Raghu's voice crackling over the city's morning call. People in the audience shifted forward, eyes riveted. There was a moment, a close-up of a child laughing as he invented a cricket bat from a drained oil container. On screen, the colors blew up, bouncing off the audience's faces. Nobody shuffled, nobody coughed. Applause came at the end, a swelling that filled my chest. As the credits rolled, the house lights brightened. I took my cue and stepped onto the stage. I could feel my father's eyes somewhere in the dim auditorium, hands clasped in his lap. I tried not to look. The MC beckoned me forward. I gripped the microphone. I was told many times that these stories didn't matter, I said, voice trembling. Our city is built not just by its monuments and billionaires, but by those who work in its forgotten corners. If you see Miraben or Raghu in the street, know that they are also Mumbai. Silence, then clapping. I met Joshi's eyes, not hard now but uncertain. After, in the crowded corridor, people shook my hand. It was moving. Aditya, powerful work. Mumbai looks different now through your lens. An older woman pressed a card into my hand. I run an NGO, she said. Come show our children how to tell their stories too. Even some familiar faces, those who'd laughed at my foolish dreams, hovered at the edges. I saw my aunt. She'd come, somehow half smiling, uncomfortable. You did well, Beta, she managed, looking everywhere but at me. And then my father. He stood by the exit, awkward in a borrowed shirt, scanning the crowd as if hunting for a way out. I walked up to him. Baba. He cut me off softly. You worked hard. I was wrong to laugh. Tonight your story was everyone's story. He hugged me, quick and clumsy, careful not to let anyone see his eyes. I closed mine, breathing in the scent of amber oil and old sweat, the familiar home I thought I'd lost. My rage softened, settling into something quieter, a solid, steady pride. That night we went home on the local, packed shoulder to shoulder with the city's pulse. My father dozed, head on the window latch, snoring lightly in rhythm with the tracks. I held Vidya's hand, and through the glass I could see Mumbai spooling past, unmasked, unresolved but impossibly alive. The next morning there were messages. An editor wanted to buy my film for a documentary channel. A professor from the university wrote to say my perspective shows unique courage. Even our neighbor greeted me at the gate, grinning wide. Arai, Aditya, you've made Vikroli proud. It was tempting to wear success like armor, to gloat where I'd once been shamed. But instead, I remembered every crushed dream, every sleepless, hungry edit, every wordless morning tea. When I walked into the university a week later, it was as a visiting guest for an open house. Joshi herself introduced me, voice heavy. This is Aditya Rao, our alumnus. You know, when I first saw his submission. The committee, maroon curtain and all, sat in the front row as my film played on their projector, the men and women on screen commanding the stage they'd been denied before. Real, urgent, undeniable. I watched their faces, saw the embarrassment, surprise, and slowly respect. Proof in 30 flickering minutes that what they'd dismissed had become something larger. Even Joshi, by the end, dabbed at her eyes. After that, I went back to Sion Flyover, to Miraben and Raghu, to the morning dew clinging to plastic, to stories too messy for air-conditioned rooms. I kept filming, even when the acclaim faded. Some dreams are built on stubbornness, on quiet rage, on the need to show a world that refuses to look. But my greatest triumph wasn't the screening. It was returning home, changed but still rooted, knowing that in the city's endless churn I had made something that mattered. Under the same old fan, drinking sweet tea with Vidya and Baba, it was clear. Rejection is the start, struggle the fuel, and home, once you find your voice, is the only place left to go.